The Russell children owe a debt of gratitude to the nation and the people of the Philippines because I'm not going home empty-handed. And
For Thanksgiving.
it's really exciting to be able to do that. And then lastly, and this will remain a highlight for me of my many visits to the Philippines, I was able to spend some time with a group of Waisili activists, a Young Southeast Asia Leadership Initiative. I care a lot about it because President Obama and former Secretary Clinton, Secretary Kerry launched it. I think I've been to every Waisili town hall that President Obama has hosted. And whenever I travel to Southeast Asia, I try to engineer an opportunity to meet with the young people. And yesterday's experience was as good as it gets. There is an incredible spirit of community service, of responsibility, of entrepreneurship, of compassion, of, let's do it together among young people in the Philippines. And this is such a young country. There is just so much ambition, so much opportunity, and such a deep sense of responsibility, including and particularly on issues relating to the environment. And while it made me feel guilty as part of the generation that messed up the global environment, it is so thrilling and reassuring, frankly, to meet so many young people who are so smart and so motivated and so engaged in making the world a better place, literally, by cleaning up the environment, by creating economic opportunities, and by promoting good communication in the first instance within the Philippines, but also among the 10 countries in ASEAN. Anyway, I'm talking too much. Let me invite you all to ask me what you want to know about and talk about.
Okay.
You want to start, Carla?
You, CNN, Philippines.
You want in alphabetical order?
Better shirt to put on today. Well, you're coming in, controversial in a long time. There have been instances in which, for instance, rape cases by U.S. soldiers and things like that, and it was never on the headlines because, there'd be Filipino groups always accusing one president after another of the Philippines of being a tuta or a puppy of towards the Americans. Question: communication, any formal document from the Philippines seeking a change in the dynamic or in certain aspects of the relations, will this kind of tone from our leadership inevitably take a toll on the alliance, for instance? Between the two nations.
Oh. Well, look, the first point is that it's a complicated world, and there are ups and downs in every relationship, and there have been difficult stretches in the U.S.-Philippine partnership, as there are in all international bilateral relations. But look, we're family. We know each other. We have lived and worked and played and learned together. And the important thing as a family is that we show respect, that we recognize the dignity and the rights of others, and that we communicate. And I'm here to listen, to explain, to share concerns, to share ideas, and to work collaboratively on a way forward that benefits both the United States and the Philippines. We can do this. And yes, it is hurtful and mystifying to be called names by a close friend, to be called names by the leader of a wonderful democracy who we respect and with whom we have shared so much history and culture. There are more than 4.5 million Filipino Americans living in the United States. There are hundreds of thousands of Americans, and I'm not the only one. Americans love the Philippines. They come here in droves for business because you've got a thriving economy and entrepreneurial culture, for tourism because you've got an incredibly beautiful country and a fantastic culture. We share a lot, and we share values, we share democracy, and we share interest in security and interest in protecting the rights of all countries, interest in protecting the rights of all citizens.
Right.
So, look, we have found ourselves in a scratchy period. The responsibility on both sides is to find a respectful way to communicate, to work forward in the best interests of our people, the best interests of the region, the best interests of the world. I don't believe that it is possible to undermine the deep roots and the warm, long-lit friendship between the United States and the Philippines. I do think that as democracies, where governments respond to the public and to the voters, that it is possible to create bad feelings that can undermine our respective interests, that can undermine the image of one country in another. I don't want to let that happen. I am working, Secretary Kerry is working, President Obama is working to make sure that our reciprocal investment in a common future is protected and that our shared interests continue to grow.
One of the contentions, and if you look at social media comments whenever stories on Philippine-US ties come up, is that, and I'll be very blunt in the language, I'll echo the language that you see on social media, that the Philippines has been getting scraps from the US. That's one of the recurring themes in terms of, for instance, what military hardware get passed on to the Philippines, for instance. They are saying that the economic and humanitarian assistance come with strings attached. Those are words of, I think, Mr. Yasay himself, Secretary Yasay. Strings attached. I was able to interview him yesterday, and I asked him, what do you mean by strings attached? And he was saying along the lines of policy requirements, we'll give you this, or we'll afford you this if you maintain a certain kind of policy when it comes to certain matters, or certain concessions in terms of trade, for instance, that according to them are more beneficial to Americans than, say, perhaps other countries, or...
Well, let me jump in here.
Right.
The internet's a big place, and it's filled with people that are expressing themselves, sometimes based on facts and sometimes based on fiction. So life is too short to try to correct every aspect of the record in terms of the internet. But let's take these issues one at a time.
Right.
I was here with President Obama when he visited and facilitated the transfer of an important, significant maritime vessel from the United States to the Philippines. There are other transfers under our Defense Articles programs that we've made to the Philippines at the Philippines' request without payment in support of Philippine self-reliance, in support of the ability of the armed forces of the Philippines and the government of the Philippines to fulfill its obligation to national security and to its own people. And that's above and beyond the availability of all kinds of U.S. Manufactured systems, should the Philippines choose to buy them, as it sometimes does. I'll tell you, there is a string attached when we transfer a system or a ship to the Philippines. That string is training. We are as much about the software as we are about the hardware. We want to ensure that the Philippines armed forces are able to support and maintain and to use equipment effectively. And I'm proud of the training that the United States provides and continues to provide. You know, the annual exercises that the U.S. and the Philippines conduct, many of them involving other friends of the Philippines in East Asia, serve the purpose of sharing American know-how, expertise, and doctrine to make your soldiers better at their job, to help them respond to crises and disasters, whether it's a typhoon or a shipwreck or an earthquake. We're proud of both the hardware and the software. To suggest that there are strings attached that connect to American economic interests or to a policy position on an unrelated matter is factually wrong. That's just not how we roll.
Sir, when it comes to the rhetoric, of course, the rhetoric statements of President Duterte, you've mentioned it was very offensive, hurtful, confusing as well. But of course, some of it are, these confusing statements were actually walked back by his cabinet secretary. So at this stage, will you take Foreign Affairs Secretary Yasay's explanation at face value, or will you wait for a clearer directive from the President himself?
Well, this is an ongoing process to understand a new leader, to get a fix on what he means by what he says and why he's saying it, where we can work together and where we have a difference, and when we have a difference, how we're going to sort through it. I had a chance today behind closed doors to sit down and spend some time with Foreign Secretary Yasay. I'm grateful for that. There is no doubt in my mind that he is acting in good faith and that he is trying to explain to me and through me to Secretary Kerry and to President Obama how he sees the direction and the intent of the new president of the Philippines. I had a chance also with my colleague to spend some time with the Secretary of National Defense, other representatives of the government, and we're working on this. It's not a black or white question. There is an ongoing process to up our communication, not through megaphones, not through insults, but through a sustained good faith effort to understand where the other guy is coming from and how we're going to proceed together in solving problems and in building something better.
But this kind of statement is also the same statement in Washington. I mean, like, of course, at this, you've already talked to Secretary Lorenzana and Secretary Yasay, but most of the time here in the Philippines, we have like this, we have this tagline for the secretaries or the spokesperson of the president as the interpretation team, because it seems like they interpret the statements of President Duterte in a manner which kind of like different from what most of the people just heard. I mean, so you accepted what the secretaries that you've met already said. So the Washington will not going to ask more clear, clear statements or clarification from the president.
Well, look, diplomacy is not just a matter of looking up words in a dictionary. So the issue isn't less clarity about the words, and it's more clarity about the way forward. The strategy, the policy priorities, and the intentions of the President of the Philippines and of the Duterte government, that's what matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that is part of an ongoing discussion.
Mm-hmm.
We share with the Foreign Secretary, with the Philippine Embassy, with other senior officials here, what we see as important goals for the alliance, for the region, for the bilateral relationship, and for the United States. What we're thinking about and planning in terms of our support for the Philippines' important ASEAN chairmanship year. What we are doing and what we could achieve in terms of economic cooperation, in terms of lifting people out of poverty, promoting good governance, development, jobs, and economic opportunity. We talk about where we think the region is going, how the South China Sea issues can be dealt with without resorting to threats or coercion, let alone the use of force. So there's a big agenda. The series of statements that are controversial, sometimes shocking, sometimes distressing, sometimes confusing, do factor into the equation.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, what will matter is what the Duterte government chooses to do. And that is.
Sir, you've mentioned a while ago, just a quick follow-up, because these uncertainty you've mentioned earlier in
Right.
DFA that it is firms to scale back exposure to the Philippines. So what's the sentiment on the ground?
Well, my sense, and multinational companies look very carefully at strategic don't like uncertainty. They like constancy, they like predictability. And on respect for and the strengthening of institutions, that directly connects to the enforceability of contracts, the reliability of partnerships, and so on. In a region that is growing so fast, where there frankly are huge competitors, it's got a surplus of people. It needs to create tens of millions of jobs just to stay afloat. At a time when trade agreements are creating markets, it's competitive. And when companies look around, they're going to ask themselves, what are the Philippines? Now, there's a lot of good news. You've got a tremendous workforce, great English language skills, and the close connection and the tradition. But if there is continued uncertainty about the direction that the country will go, as an unintended byproduct of then yeah, I think that these will be factors that international business people, not only the United States, not only Japan, but businesses worldwide will take into account.
US calls this situation unnecessary uncertainty. How will this unnecessary Filipino workers in America and those working in business process outsourcing, what is at stake?
Well, the short answer is I don't know. I have heard considerable amount of concern expressed both by expatriate Filipinos in the United States, by companies who are involved in I think it's still early days. The Philippines have close ties to the U.S. are a major advantage in a number of respects. Filipinos are always going to be warmly welcomed in the United States. And I don't just mean Manny Pacquiao. My 4.5 years working in the White House, where the president's executive chef, where his closest I know from my hometown, New York, and from the time I how much Philippine Americans contribute to resilient. There's a deep, deep wellspring of goodwill in both directions, and that gives me
question. Do you want to give one of your colleagues
All right.
an opportunity? Because we're out of time.
yes.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry. I'm too long-winded.
No. Assistant Secretary, what to China with your own pivot to Asia? And if I may, do you think the upcoming U.S. elections, with the election of a new U.S. president, will somehow change the atmosphere?
I wouldn't use the word pivot to describe the gradual atmospherics between the Philippines and China. But whatever you call it, it's a good thing. The tensions that China for some considerable time now, even preceding have been a driver of tension and this has been an issue and China's claimants in the South China Sea have been issues that have dominated ASEAN meetings that have, if, as Secretary Kerry said when he was here in July, the Philippines and China can talk directly on terms that are acceptable to the Philippines, and that that's a good thing, and that could be on the kind of regional stability and cooperation that certainly the United States and the Philippines are going to be the U.S. presidential election. I'm of the view, based on the work that I've been doing and what I've seen, that any U.S. interest, both economic interest, political interest, security interest in East Asia, and decide to keep a good thing going. I don't think it's a matter of Republican or Democrat. The relationship with our friends and fellow democracies and allies, the relationship with the Philippines is at the heart of the rebalance, and improved relations between Manila and Beijing need not and should not come at the expense of this is a matter of addition and not of subtraction. The start that President Duterte towards an acceptance of the decision by the arbitral tribunal in is a lot smaller, and even though it is a lot weaker in security terms, has access its own EEZ, every bit as much right to operate in the region as a big and a powerful country like China does. I've got my fingers crossed.
Sir, sir, I'm Anthony Esguerra from The Inquirer, and I'm a member of Voicili as well.
Great.
Oh, me too.
Sir, my question is, how does Washington prepare for a Philippine full-fledged independent foreign policy?
We have a lot of experience with a full-fledged independent. This notion that the Philippines is somehow it may make a good story, but it's not supported by the facts. The fact is that the United States is stronger are themselves strong. If the United States was pulling the strings on a puppet, trust me, the Philippines would have made a lot of different policy calls. We the autonomy and the democracy of the Philippines. You get to make your own decisions. Persuade you, but we never want to dictate to you. And I think that the Obama administration certainly, and the Bush administration have built a strong partnership based on mutual consent, based on mutual respect, to gain and nothing to fear from a strong, independent Philippine
Independent from the U.S., completely independent from the U.S.
Well, look, let's think about the words here. Your independence is also a given. We're in the 21st century. The world is connected. Our culture, our economy, our values, our democracy. And so we should build on that strength. We should go with it. That's certainly our strategy. But that's not to be confused. It is no impediment to the ability of the Philippines and the government of the Philippines to make its own decisions based on its own assessment of national interest.
Is it clear now? Do you feel like you have an understanding enough for a way forward that's clear?
Well, as I said before, the issue is not about parsing words. The issue is about work, reconcile competing or certainly confident. Who is working in good faith on with the United States. I have to say bye.
Thank you.
Thanks
Sir,
so
last
much.
note.
Thank you.
What do you
Thank
think
you.
of the
Thank
ambassador
you.
designate?
Three
Oh,
questions.
This,
Yes,
no,
yes,
no,
yes.
no, this,
Please, sir.
this question, I'm
Okay,
sorry,
okay, okay.
I have to answer.
Okay.
Ambassador Phil Goldberg, who I've known for many years. This is a guy who loves the Philippines. This is a guy who has made a difference. I've known Phil for many years. Soon after he had presented his credentials here, and he took Secretary Kerry to Tacloban. He briefed Secretary Kerry on the tremendous work that the embassy and the U.S. military, USAID, had done in disaster response and in disaster. I think that Ambassador Goldberg has created an incredible and a positive record. His work with business to create more jobs and opportunity for both Americans and educational exchanges like Fulbright, like YC, like other programs. His work in ensuring that we're providing the best possible visa services to Filipinos to make sure that we're looking after Americans who come here. His concern for security, his concern for the alliance. I think he's been a wonderful. Anyone less than a star in the U.S. diplomatic service, you are in for a treat. The new ambassador, and a wonderful guy and a close friend of mine. I gotta go.
Thank you, sir.